I would like to share with you something I experienced in a new way when I traveled to India. And lots of you might already be familiar with it. It is a gesture and a word that in India serves as a greeting, a farewell, and an expression of gratitude. Here is the gesture, and the word is namaste. And that means I bow to the divinity in you. I bow to the divinity in you. And one of the most important things about namaste is that when it is given, it must always be returned. It is always mutual. Namaste. Namaste. In January of 2008, I had the privilege of traveling to India for 3 weeks with students and faculty from Lancaster Theological Seminary, where I was a student. The trip was called the Cross-Cultural Seminar, and it was required for all Master of Divinity students. I had to go to India. They made me. And the purpose of the trip was for students first to experience another culture than their own. And there was a person on that trip who had never been out of Pennsylvania in her life, and she was in her 60s. But even more important for the students at this United Church of Christ Seminary was for them to experience Christianity in another cultural setting. So we visited 5 cities in 3 weeks, staying at Christian seminaries and other Christian institutions. Our host seminaries and churches were all part of the Church of South India, which is the major Christian Protestant church in India. For me, and I think for many of my trip mates, one of the highlights of the trip was our 3-day homestay with Church of South India ministers. Our homestays took place at the very southernmost tip of India in Kanyakumari. The ministers who took us into their homes for the weekend, they had been given really strict instructions. We were not to be treated as tourists, but as colleagues and included in all their ministries for the weekend. And I can tell you, as the weekend approached, we were terrified at the thought of doing this. So on a Friday afternoon, in the small city of Nagercoil, seat of the Bishop of Kanyakumari, we were parceled out 2 by 2 and scattered across the district. My roommate Rachel and I were assigned to the Reverend Maher in the nearby town of Kolachel. And on the way to his house, we stopped to pick up his wife, Dea Shaju, who was coming from her work, and their 18-month-old baby, Johannan, who was in daycare. We arrived at the church and parsonage well after dark. Dea Shaju and Maher immediately set about making dinner, and then after dinner, we could finally relax and chat. And Rachel and I immediately gave the Reverend Maher the bad news. He had gotten the oddities of the trip. Rachel was the seminary's faculty secretary, not a student at all, and therefore excused from any ministry activities for the weekend. And I, though a student, was not a Christian. Maher took it all in stride. Rachel and I were so lucky in our homestay family. That evening, Maher, who was fascinated, asked me in detail about my beliefs in theology. He was very interested in my Unitarian Universalist faith and practice. And there was so much that I said that he affirmed and appreciated. And he spoke to me of being a Christian minister in South India and what were the most important aspects of his religious life and service as a minister. The next morning, Saturday, Maher and I made home visits in Maher's neighborhood. We visited Protestants, Muslims, Roman Catholics, and Hindus, mostly families who were poor and struggling to survive. And I saw that Maher was held in so much esteem by the people of all faiths that we visited. Maher asked me if I would pray for and bless people who requested it, and so I did. Most of the people we met, they did want a prayer or a blessing from me. So I prayed with blessed and anointed women, children, and men. None of the people knew English, and Maher did not translate. Hindu, Protestant, Muslim, and Catholic, they accepted me and what I offered with openness and graciousness. It did not seem to matter that I wasn't speaking in a language that they understood. With the people of this neighborhood, I experienced transcendent moments of connection and grace and humility. On Sunday evening, we were hosted for a farewell dinner by the bishop at his residence in Nagercoil, and he stopped to chat briefly with each of us. He told me that about 2 years before, very near to Maher's church, there had been dreadful sectarian violence between Hindus and Christians at a Hindu temple. Over 20 people had been killed. Interfaith tensions remained very high in the area. Yet, I did not witness any such tension in Maher's neighborhood in the way that his neighbors responded to him and respected and cared for one another. Over and over again, as our group attended lectures and presentations at seminaries, we heard one main theological message from the esteemed theologians who taught us. This message was of the importance of true religious pluralism. Religious pluralism was presented to us as essential and completely interwoven with the practice of Christianity in India. Now, this message of religious pluralism was so radical that many of my Christian tripmates could not accept it. And they declared so loudly in our evening meetings. So, what is this religious pluralism I learned of in India, and why should it matter to us as Unitarian Universalists? There are 3 different paths that relations between the religions can take: exclusivism, inclusivism, and pluralism. Religious exclusivism is the assertion that one's own religion is the only true and valid way to understand and relate to what is real and what is ultimate in our lives. Those who are non-believers are in some way condemned in this life and or in an afterlife. For strong religious exclusivists, the only legitimate form of shared religious activity between different faiths is conversion. For religious exclusivists, their faith can be like a stone, rigid and complete. Nothing can be added to it. Nothing can be changed. And like a stone, it can be used to wound people. The practice of religious exclusivism is a main cause of the worldwide violence, conflict, and oppression that is justified on religious grounds. Religious inclusivism is the belief that there may be value in other religious traditions, but that value remains limited. Inclusivists may believe that other faiths offer some form of salvation, however defined, but this salvation still remains that of the inclusivist faith. And this is true even if others have never heard of the inclusivist faith. So that is, for religious inclusivists, people of other faiths are really members of the inclusivist faith, but just don't know it. For religious inclusivists, their religion remains the only true one and is considered the fulfillment of all other religions. And I experienced this at seminary as the only Unitarian Universalist in my class. And I remember one of my classmates said to me, with a great deal of sincere love, Cyndi, you are really a Christian. And I know that you will know Jesus. And I loved it that she said that to me. That was an example of religious inclusivism, and it can be filled with love and good wishes. So, although religious inclusivism is not as potentially dangerous or destructive as inclusivism, but it is patronizing and presumptuous, inclusivism remains really disrespectful at the core of other people's religious traditions, however genuinely lovingly it may be meant. It is only through the practice of a true religious pluralism that healthy relationships and a full religious understanding are possible between people of different religions. And I make a distinction between true and shallow pluralism. Religious pluralism is often misunderstood as affirming a type of shallow relativism. This type of shallow relativism says that all religions are essentially the same and at their heart present the same set of values. Perhaps you have heard of that metaphor of the various religions being like different paths up a mountain, the same mountain. Well, I'm a humanist-flavored, Buddhist-inspired, pagan Unitarian Universalist who loves Jesus. I'm here to tell you that not only are our paths different, we are not on the same mountain. There are deep and real differences and contradictions among the various religions. Differences among their beliefs, their practices, their values, and their aims. And to minimize these differences is to reduce all religions to some lowest common denominator that doesn't really exist. And a great deal of interfaith dialogue, sadly, does not move beyond emphasizing the similarities among faiths. And that is not a bad thing, to seek out our commonalities. But it avoids the truly challenging work of understanding and respecting those differences that can make us so uncomfortable. At United Theological College in Bangalore, Protestant theologian Dr. K.C. Abraham spoke to us about religious pluralism, and he said that living it requires two practices. First, people must be willing to criticize their own religious beliefs, values, and practices. You must be willing to engage in critique around your beliefs. Second, people must be willing to learn from other religious traditions about their beliefs and values and be open to learn what that might mean for their own beliefs. So, true religious pluralism is about a willingness to be transformed in your own self, your own deepest held values, beliefs, and practices by engaging deeply with the values, beliefs, and practices of others. Religious pluralists believe that it is only through the encounters with the religious other that our own faith can truly develop. What is the value of our sense of ultimate reality if it cannot endure the challenge or questions we get through meeting the religious lives of others? How can our relationships with ourselves, all beings, and ultimate reality grow and flourish in our isolation? If there is no genuine encounter with the religious other, that's when religion can become a stone. Whether you conceive of what is real and what is ultimate as goddess, as the universe, as the force of the human spirit, as God, or as something else altogether, you must know that your conception is limited. None of us can know the reality, the totality of what is real and what is ultimate. There is always more to learn. There is always awe and reverence for the unknown spirit of life. There's always the mystery. And this mystery is necessary, so necessary in our human lives. So I came back from India much stronger and more committed in my Unitarian Universalism, which I did not think was possible. This didn't happen because I went to India and practiced religious pluralism. It happened because people in India practiced religious pluralism with me. They were willing to have me pray with them, preach to them, bless them, and worship with them. They were willing to teach and share what they believed in a non-defensive way and to learn what I believed. The Christians I encountered in India modeled religious pluralism completely. And their biggest gift to me, their greatest gift, was their willingness to be a mirror in which I could see my own faith reflected back to me through theirs. So, why should we care about this idea of religious pluralism as Unitarian Universalists? Because we're good. We, Unitarian Universalists, manage some aspects of the interreligious life very well. We affirm other religions socially and politically. We are champions of religious tolerance and freedom worldwide. That is wonderful, that is important, and that is necessary, but not sufficient for true religious pluralism. As a religion without creed or doctrine, we UUs have an incredible opportunity to transform ourselves through the practice of religious pluralism. All too often, though, we can remain reluctant or unwilling to engage with people of different faiths, even within our own congregations. It's as if we sometimes have a don't ask, don't tell policy about sharing our religious beliefs and values with one another. And to avoid this kind of sharing builds a cage that limits our own growth and our love and respect for one another. Our discomfort also limits how we relate to the wider world. Living true religious pluralism means saying yes to the hard and exciting work of knowing each other as the other wishes to be known, as their most whole and complete self, through learning of the truths and the values and their sense of what is ultimate and real in their lives. The practice of religious pluralism is necessary to develop the deep and genuine respect and love that is necessary for community within and beyond our walls. The respect and love that are called for by our first principle and all our covenants with one another. I would say, I am not sure it is possible to truly respect someone's deepest dignity and their inherent worth if you really don't know what they believe religiously, because that's a core part of their identity. And when we can get into that discomfort of, I'm a humanist and she's a pagan, I don't know if I want to hear about that woo-woo stuff. We are missing who that person truly, truly is. And in a bigger sense, it's only through the practice of religious pluralism that we have a chance of ending the worldwide violence and oppression that comes from the practice of religious exclusivism. So, your spiritual homework this week, and yes, even the guest gives you spiritual homework, if you choose, is to ask someone in this congregation, maybe someone you don't know very well, about their religious beliefs, values, and practices, however they might define them. Then listen with all your heart to what that person has to say. Please try to avoid the error of confusing understanding with agreement and seek for understanding. Reflect on what you hear from that person. And please ask yourself, What did I learn about myself and my own beliefs, values, and practices from engaging deeply with this person, this beloved person's beliefs and values? So in the reading this morning, we are asked to bring strange things, to bring new things, to let very old things come into our hands. And these are the strange and the new and the very old things we encounter in the religious other. If we walk carefully, walk mindfully, walk fearlessly into the religious lives of others, we will always be coming home. And this homecoming will be to a truer self. This homecoming will be to a truer sense of our community of Unitarian Universalists. This homecoming will be to a fuller understanding of how we can heal the world. So may it be. Namaste. Namaste.